Dear students, most welcome to the B.Sc second year class. To continue with same paper, that is paper number 5, namely electronic circuits. In that, to start with topic number 4, that is feedback amplifier. Students, already we have completed 3 topics of paper number 5. And in the last topic, we have studied the different types of the amplifiers, in which we completed starting from the basic action of transistor as an amplifier up to the analysis of different types of amplifier configurations. Then multi-stage amplifiers. Then we have studied the different types of power amplifiers, including push-pull power amplifier, complementary symmetry power amplifier, and also the distortion which is likely to be appearing in the power amplifier circuitry. So that is what the variety of the amplifier circuitry we have studied in topic number 3. And now we are going to start with another aspect of amplifier which is most widely used, and that is known as feedback amplifier. Friends, as the name suggests, that feedback amplifier, we are going to cover this particular topic as per our usual lecture plan. We are going to begin this particular topic with its definition. Then we are going to study the types of feedback in amplifiers. Then we are going to introduce the concept of feedback. After that, we are going to study the general theory of feedback, where you are going to understood clearly about the types of feedback. Then we are going to study what are the advantages and disadvantages of the negative feedback in amplifier. And we are going to prove the almost all advantages and disadvantages of the negative feedback with the title that increase in stability, increase in bandwidth, decrease in distortion, decrease in noise, increase in input impedance, decrease in output impedance. So these are the properties which are associated with the negative feedback amplifier, and we are going to prove all these properties one by one. After that, we are going to cover types of negative feedback amplifier. Friends, at the beginning we have studied the types of feedback in amplifier. Now we are going to study types of negative feedback in amplifier. In that, we are going to study details regarding current series type of feedback amplifier. So this is the plan of our lectures. How we are going to complete the topic number 4, namely feedback amplifier. So let us begin with its definition. Now, to begin with the feedback in amplifier, as its name suggests, feedback means basically whatever amplifier circuitry we have studied, same amplifier circuitries we are going to considering, and in that some part of the output we are taking and it is giving back to the input in the form of feedback signal. And the amplifier that uses this particular property of providing some fraction, some part of the output back to the input is known as the feedback amplifier. Thus we can say feedback is the process in which some part or fraction of the output is fed back to the input. Input of what? Input of the amplifier. And due to this, feeding some part of the output to the input, it may increase the input signal or it may decrease the input signal. This process is known as feedback process. And the amplifier that uses this particular principle, that amplifier is known as feedback in amplifier or feedback amplifier. Thus, we can say feedback amplifier consists of, or this process consists of, two parts. One is amplifier and second one is feedback network. Here the role of amplifier is to increase the strength of weak signal, and the role of feedback network is to feed the part of the output back to the input. Hence, just to define the process of feedback, we can say feedback is the process in which some part or fraction of the output is fed back to the input of an amplifier to increase or decrease the input signal, or to increase or decrease the gain of amplifier. And this process is known as the feedback process. And amplifier that uses this particular principle, it is known as feedback amplifier. It consists of two parts. One is basic amplifier that is used to amplify the big signal, and second one is the feedback network. Its role is to feed the part of the output back to the input. In general, we can say due to application of the feedback, the gain of the amplifier may going to increase or may going to decrease. And depending upon whether the feedback signal increases or decreases the input signal, or increases or decreases the gain, there are two types of the feedback. One is positive feedback and second one is the negative feedback. Friends, positive feedback is the feedback in which some part or some fraction of the output is fed back to the input in such a way that it will increases the input signal. In the sense, the part of the output which is fed back to the input, it is in phase with that of the input. And when part of the output feedback to the input is in phase with the input, it is added into the input so that input is increased. This increase in input naturally increases the output voltage. In terms, the gain of the amplifier also increases. Such a type of the feedback is known as the positive feedback, or it is known as regenerative feedback, or it is known as direct feedback. Thus we can say positive feedback process is the process in which part of the output which is feedback to the input is in phase with the input. Due to this, it will increase the input signal. This increase in input signal increases the output voltage in terms of increasing the gain of the amplifier circuitry. Such a type of the feedback is known as positive feedback or direct feedback, or it is called as regenerative feedback. In this case, feedback factor is positive. Feedback factor is positive, and which is always less than 1. Second type of the feedback is negative feedback. Negative feedback is the type of feedback in amplifier in which the part of output voltage or fraction of the output voltage feedback to the input voltage is out of phase with that of the input voltage. And when feedback signal is out of phase with that of the input signal, it is subtracted from the input. And when feedback signal is subtracted from the input, it will decreases the input signal. And this decrease in input signal decreases the output voltage by decreasing the gain. Such a type of the feedback is known as negative feedback, or it is called as a degenerative feedback, or it is called as an inverse type of feedback. In this case, feedback factor is negative. If feedback factor is negative, then and then only feedback signal is out of phase with that of the input, hence it is subtracted from the input, hence it decreases the input signal. As input signal decreases, naturally output voltage also decreases, which in turn decreases the gain of the amplifier. Thus, to classify the feedback in two types, one is the positive feedback and second one is the negative feedback. Friends, generally positive feedback is used in oscillator circuitries. Apart from that, in most of the cases, negative feedback is peculiarly used in all the type of amplifier except the oscillator circuits. Friends, let us proceed with study the meaning or concept of feedback. What is the concept of feedback? As we have studied the definition of feedback, that it is a process by which some part of the output signal is picked up and it is given back to the input in the form of feedback signal. Either it is subtracted from the input or it is added into the input, depends upon the feedback factor. Accordingly, it may increases the gain of basic amplifier or it may decreases the gain of basic amplifier. So to understand the concept of feedback, we can consider the block diagram represented here. So this is the block diagram which is much useful just to understand the concept of feedback. If you look to the block diagram, we can say it consists of some 5 blocks. First is a signal source which is represented here. The output of signal source is given to the comparator or comparator, or we can call it as a mixer. Output of mixer or comparator is given to the basic amplifier. Friends, this is the basic amplifier. So it is represented in the form of block diagram. This basic amplifier means it may be amplifier in common emitter configuration, it may be amplifier in common base configuration, it may be amplifier in common collector configuration. Any type of amplifier one may going to consider. To this here we are going to be considering as a basic amplifier. And this is the amplifier that is used to increase the gain of input signal by its standard definition, which you have studied in the last topic. This output of basic amplifier is given to the sampling network. Sampling network is connected at the output of the basic amplifier, as its name suggests. It samples the output signal. Output of that is given to the load resistance. Sampled signal is given to the feedback network. As at the beginning of this particular topic, in the definition we have studied that it consists of 2 parts. One is amplifier and second is the feedback network, which are represented here. So this is the basic amplifier circuitry, whereas this is the feedback network. The output of feedback network is given back to the comparator, and this is the feedback signal. And this feedback signal is given to the comparator or mixer. In comparator or mixer, 2 signals, that is signal from the source which is expected to be amplified and the feedback signal picked up or sampled by the sampling network, are compared or added. If it is added, it is done by using mixer circuitry. It is compared, means it is subtracted by using comparator circuitry. Both the aspects are going to be included in this particular block diagram. If no feedback is used, it's alright. No feedback signal is there. Directly signal from the source goes to the basic amplifier. It is amplified and directly it is made available across the load resistance. If feedback concept of feedback is used, then part of the basic output of the basic amplifier is sampled, it is picked up and given to the feedback network. Feedback network feeds this feedback signal to the comparator, where again comparison or mixing process is done, and then it is given to the basic amplifier. It will amplify the particular signal. So that is the basic difference between with feedback and without feedback. If no feedback, signal directly given to the basic amplifier. It is amplified and it is produced at the output. If concept of feedback is used, output of the basic amplifier is picked up, sampled by the sampling network, given to the feedback network. Feedback network feeds the signal to the comparator. Here, input signal and that of the feedback signal both are either compared or it is going to be added. Then it is given to the basic amplifier and then the amplification process that takes place. Friends, what do you mean by signal source? Signal source, it may be voltage source or current source. If it is a voltage source, then it has its internal series resistance. If it is a current source, then it has internal parallel source resistors. Accordingly, whether current amplification is to be done or voltage amplification is to be done, that type of signal source is going to be connected. Again, try to remember, signal source, maybe it is a voltage source or it may be a current source. If it is a voltage source, it has its internal series resistance. If it is a current source, it has its parallel resistance or it has a shunt resistance. This signal source is given to the comparator or mixer. Comparator or mixer, it is a circuit that compares the input signal source with the feedback signal. If the feedback signal is out of phase with the input signal, then it compares both the signals. Means feedback signal is subtracted from the input signal so as to reduce the input of basic amplifier. And if feedback signal is in phase with that of the input source signal, then both are added, combined together, mixed together so as to increase the input signal to the basic amplifier. Such a signal is given to the basic amplifier. As it is already told you, basic amplifier is designed with some fixed voltage gain or current gain. Accordingly, it amplifies the input signal provided to it. It may be common emitter amplifier, it may be common base amplifier, or it may be a common collector amplifier as per requirement, which was studied in last topic. Thus, basic amplifier amplifies the input signal and it is made available at the output. To understand the concept of feedback at the output of the basic amplifier, we have connected the sampling network. Its role is to sample the output signal, means to pick some part of the output signal. Its role is to take a fraction of the output signal, and this fraction of the output signal or part of the output signal will be decided by means of a feedback factor. The feedback factor is always less than 1. As I am saying that the feedback factor is less than 1, no entire signal is given back to the input. So that's why we are going to say some part of the output signal or fraction of the output signal. If the feedback factor is equal to 1, then and then only entire signal is fed back to the input. But here, as always, we are using the concept that feedback factor is less than 1. As feedback factor is less than 1, some part of the signal will be picked up and it is given to the feedback network. Feedback network is a combination of a resistor network, passive device network, that feedback sampled signal to the comparator. Friends, in this case, here output voltage, if it is a VO, out of that VO, K times VO is the signal which is fed back to the input or comparator. In this case, VO is the output voltage, K is the feedback factor. If K is equal to 1, then the entire output is available. But what we are arranging here, value of K should be less than 1. If value of K is less than 1, then output voltage is some part of the output voltage or it is a fraction of the output voltage. That fraction of the output voltage, it is given to the mixer. If suppose value of K is positive, then feedback signal is positive, and this positive signal If it is provided to the mixer, it is in phase with that of input signal, then it is added. If it is added, it will increases the input signal, which will increases the gain of basic amplifier. Then that type of the feedback it is called as positive feedback. And if suppose feedback factor is negative, then feedback signal feedback to the input is out of phase with the input signal. And if it is out of phase with the input signal, it is subtracted from the input, which will reduces the input. Hence, it will reduces the gain of amplifier, and this happens in the negative feedback amplifier. Suppose it is a current source, then current I is given to the basic amplifier. It is amplified and amplified output current is available here. Some part of this will be picked up and it is K times IO is given back to the input. This is what the concept of feedback means. If suppose feedback network is removed from this particular block diagram, just it is going to act as a simple amplifier. Means no comparison, no sampling. If suppose it takes a sample, then there is no feedback network. That means it is not provided back the input. When no signal is provided back to the input in the form of the feedback signal, it is called as without feedback amplifier. And if the feedback network is included, that provides part of the output back to the input, then entire circuitry we can call it as it is the feedback circuitry or feedback amplifier. So this is what the meaning or concept of the feedback in amplifier. Dear friends, in today's lecture, just we have covered the definition of feedback in amplifier. It is a process in which some part of the output, some fraction of the output is fed back to the input so as to increase or decrease the gain of amplifier. And the amplifier that uses this particular principle is called as feedback amplifier. Depending upon whether the feedback signal increases or decreases the input signal, there are two types. One is a positive feedback and second one is negative feedback. And then we have covered the concept of feedback by using the block diagram. Friends, that's all about today's lecture. Next time we'll go for understanding the general theory of the feedback. Today we will stop. We'll meet in the next time.